So good afternoon and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Ateneo de Manila University Department of Economics Seminar Series. I'm Jemmy Lontoc. I'm the Associate Chair of the Department of Economics. So to begin our event this afternoon, we have a couple of house rules. We will let the speaker finish his presentation first before we entertain questions. For our Zoom participants, kindly stay on mute and stop sharing your video during the duration of the presentation. During the Q&A segment, please virtually raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. You may unmute and show yourself when asking your question. To our participants joining us via Facebook, please post your question in the comments section. Slides, videos, and other materials from the seminar are posted on our website only when the speaker gives his consent for sharing them. So the first segment of our event this afternoon will be a special lecture webinar about food prices and inflation. And the second part will be the signing ceremony for the Memorandum of Understanding on Research Collaboration among the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, University of the Philippines Los Baños, and the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development. So it is my honor to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. He serves as an independent member of the Monetary Board of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, tasked to focus on promotion of financial inclusion for rural and agricultural development. He has over 36 years of senior level experience working with international development agencies, government agencies, and non-governmental organizations in development, governance, finance, and socio-economic projects and organizations in Asia and Africa. So let us all welcome our speaker for this afternoon, Dr. V. Bruce Tolentino.
Good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Now, first, let me thank the Ateneo for hosting this seminar. It was suggested, in fact, by Maharavago, who unfortunately isn't with us today due to a family emergency. Also, I congratulate the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Ateneo de Manila University, and the University of the Philippines at Los Baños for entering into a research collaboration. This is crucial because we share the problems and we need to share in the analysis and research required to solve these important problems, one of which is food inflation. Now, food inflation has been with us for so long. Last week, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas sent a letter to the President based on an agreement in the Development Budget Coordinating Committee. This letter to the President tried to explain to the President why is it that in 2021, inflation breached the inflation target of 3% plus or minus 1. And the explanation given by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is that, well, food prices is the principal culprit in the increase in inflation in 2021. And based on that, I will take off. Let's share the slides, please. Now, one of the things we need to understand is that food prices have contributed an average of 47% of inflation over the recent history of the country. If you look at the slide, in 2015, 91% of inflation was contributed by food. In 2021, 44% of inflation was contributed by food. The other items that are figure important in the inflation picture is energy and transport. But food is the crucial thing because it is our staple. We eat it every day. Moving forward, let's see. Doesn't seem to, okay. Now, this is a more detailed picture of month by month inflation over 2020 to 2021. The blue bars are food items. The green bars is transport, and the red is energy. Very clearly here, these are the dominant items in our inflation picture. These are the dominant items that influence our household spending. And it is very clear that we need to manage these aspects in order to ensure that the cost of living of Filipinos is well managed. In the second half of 2021, inflation trended down primarily because the president issued an executive order that allowed more imports of pork. Pork was the driving thing, and also increased the minimum access volume for pork imports. There was also an agreement to lower the tariffs for pork imports temporarily. I say there is a case now for making these reductions in tariffs as well as the increase in the minimum access volume permanent. This is because Filipinos need the food that they need at a lower cost in order for their cost of living to be well managed. We checked also on whether or not the influence of food and energy is transitory. This displays the measures of core inflation. Core inflation is the same inflation, except that we have removed the influence of food and transport, the volatile items, food and energy. This displays that core inflation has really been driven by supply side items, energy and food. Now, why is this happening? Let's look at history. This is rice prices from 2008 to 2021. A long period, you might say. But we need to look at history because our country has been influenced by the history of rice monopolies managed by the NFA for so long. You can see, the first thing to see is that the upper two lines, which is the retail prices of rice, well-milled rice and regular milled rice, have been rising over time. There was a rapid increase in 2008 in the context of the global financial crisis and the Asian financial crisis. And there was also a rapid increase in 2018 because of the supply and stocks of rice that had been depleted in that period. You will also note the green line. The green line is farm gate prices, the prices received by farmers when they sell their palay. You will note that the gap between consumer prices and farmers' prices has been growing over time. Consumers have been paying more and more for their rice, but farmers in general have been earning the same. After the rice tariffication law in 2019, rice prices started to go down. Farm gate prices also went down, but by less. Over time, the prices will become closer, meaning that consumers are able to enjoy prices that are less affected by inflation factors or monopoly factors that were exercised by the National Food Authority. Another way to look at this, can we move the slide? Is the contributions of food items to inflation. These are the commodity groups that we're looking at and the food items and their weight in the consumer price index. After the rice tariffication law, rice, which has a weight in the consumer basket of 9.6%, contributed only negative or zero to inflation. But meat, fish, and vegetables were still significant contributors to inflation. Next. And another way to look at rice prices is to compare our domestic rice prices, Philippines, to the prices that are enjoyed by consumers in Thailand or Vietnam, so that you know really what is cheap. We can say rice is cheap compared to yesterday or more expensive compared to yesterday, but the real test of whether or not rice is cheap or expensive is to compare the rice with those who are also producing rice. The top two lines are the same rice retail lines that you saw earlier. The bottom two lines are the prices in Vietnam and Thailand. The gray line for Vietnam and the yellow line for Thailand. You will see that the prices in the Philippines have been 2 to 3 times that of Thailand and Vietnam. And over the period 2012 to 2018, they have risen steadily and spiked in 2018. After the rice tariffication law started to go down to be more competitive with Thailand and Vietnam. Our consumers, as a result of the rice tariffication law, are now able to enjoy the same rice prices or similar rice prices to those of Thai and Vietnamese consumers. The gap in these prices show why we have always been importing from Thailand or Vietnam. Now, you ask yourself, why is it that Thai rice farmers and Vietnamese rice farmers are able to produce at such low prices and are still able to export to the Philippines? That is the key question that we need to answer. Next. Given support under the rice tariffication law and the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, rice production and yield has grown. Palay production in 2021 reached almost 20 million metric tons, a historic high. And the expectation in 2022 is that that will even be higher. Productivity has also increased per hectare. Because productivity has increased, rice farmers are able to grow more and sell more so that their incomes have also grown. If we keep pushing productivity and competitiveness increases, then the incomes of farmers will rise and will start to equalize the incomes of Thai farmers and Vietnamese farmers. Next. So, apart from lower rice inflation, stable domestic prices, and better yields, the rice tariffication law resulted in lower, more competitive production cost of rice. Also, rice tariff collections have been allocated to the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund to support welfare and productivity of farmers. And finally, improved household welfare not only for consumers, but also for farmers, and as a result, for the entire Filipino population. Now, rice has been solved in a way because of the rice tariffication law. We have a lot more work to do, but the key issue has been resolved since rice is no longer a factor in inflation. This chart shows that the green line, which is rice, has been negative to zero in its contribution to inflation. But you can see the yellow line, which is fish, and the purple line, which is meat, contributing at double-digit levels to inflation. Fish more than 10% at a certain point, and meat more than 20% at a certain point over the last few months. Next. And this is the reality. Filipinos pay almost double for pork compared to Thais. Nearly 30% more compared to Vietnamese. In the Philippines, pork is 276 pesos a kilo. In the USA, well, it's less than 150. In Vietnam, it's 159 pesos per kilo. In Thailand, it's 125 pesos per kilo. And note that the price of pork in the Philippines has been growing over time. But the price of pork in Vietnam and Thailand has been stable or even falling. How come this is happening in Vietnam and Thailand, but it is a bad situation in our country? Let's look at chicken. Chicken is also horribly expensive in the Philippines. 180 pesos per kilo, chicken in the Philippines. But it's only 125 pesos per kilo in Vietnam and 76 pesos per kilo in Thailand. And the price of chicken in the Philippines has been growing over time. But in Thailand and Vietnam, stable or even going down. Vietnamese and Thai farmers have been getting more efficient and more productive. Now, why is this so? The principal issue is animal feed. And the principal animal feed in the Philippines is corn. In the Philippines, to produce a kilo of pork, it costs 112 pesos per kilo. And out of the 112 pesos per kilo, 64 pesos is due to corn. To produce a kilo of chicken, it costs 92 pesos per kilo. And of the 92 pesos per kilo, 60 pesos is corn. So if we are able to reduce the price of corn, then the cost of livestock feed will also fall and we will be more competitive. But, next, the wholesale price of yellow corn in the Philippines is the highest among our comparator countries. 20 pesos per kilo in the Philippines, but only 11 pesos per kilo in Thailand and something like 12 pesos per kilo in Vietnam. No wonder they're able to sell more at lower prices and are able to produce more cost-effective food for their people than us. This is a major issue that we must solve. And another reason why the wholesale price of yellow corn is highest in the Philippines is because our tariffs are very high. Whenever we import yellow corn, we pay on an out quota basis 50% of tariff. When we import chicken or pork, we need to pay 40% in tariff. These are additional costs that go into the cost of production of meat as well as into the consumer prices of meat, chicken, and pork. That's the challenge that we must face. Given these challenges, the Bangko Sentral thinks that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Managing inflation means that we do expect that we are able to keep inflation within target for the next year or two. But we are worried. BSP worries that supply constraints and higher commodity prices pose upside risks. So if the price of corn and the price of meat and the price of fish shoot up, then we will face major episodes of inflation. Next. So, moving on, please. What is the work ahead that we need to do? Well, we need to manage inflation amid the fears and the pressure from higher commodity prices and projected deficits in domestic corn, pork, and fish supply. We need to push productivity enhancing assistance for farmers, research, technology, and policy reforms that enable competitiveness in feed corn, livestock, poultry, and fisheries. We need to provide RCEP-like assistance for the livestock and feed industries. And the RCEP-like assistance is assistance for productivity and competitiveness. Technology, machinery, good germplasm, training, not bans, not subsidies, because we now have learned after long and painful experience that bans and subsidies do not work or are only temporary palliative solutions. We also need to review and streamline non-tariff barriers and constraints to agricultural products. A lot of work has been started on this. Under the strong leadership of Secretary William Dar, these regulations are being reviewed. The economic team under the leadership of Secretary Carlos Dominguez is united in pushing forward these reforms even in the last few months of the Duterte administration. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Tolentino. Now we proceed to the Q&A segment, an open forum of our webinar. For the participants in Zoom, you may raise your hand so that we can acknowledge and we can call you so you can ask your question. You can also type your questions in the Zoom chat. And for our participants in Facebook, you can also place your questions in the comment section. So we have a raised hand. I'd like to call Dr. Carlo Adriano for the first question of the Q&A segment.
Hi, Sir Bruce. Good afternoon. I have a question. So you've mentioned that fish inflation has been consistently high, especially since 2017, and it ranks around first or second highest in terms of inflation since 2017 among the food basket. What is your recommendation for the fish sector? What do we need to change?
Well, for feeds, as I said earlier, first, we need to push productivity and competitiveness among our farmers. We need to supply technology, we need to supply good seeds, we need to supply training so that they can implement the additional technology and improved technology to grow their competitiveness. The other aspect that we need to push is that we need to support science and improved seeds that are coming into the country. There are many barriers against introducing new varieties in the country. And the new improved varieties are required so that the farmers can get fresh batches of seeds that they can plant for higher productivity. Finally, we need to review very much the tariffs that we are now imposing on feed corn. Our tariffs, quota tariffs are 50%. They're the highest in the region. Recently, Vietnam brought the tariffs of corn to 2%. Vietnam tariffs 2%, Philippine tariffs 50%. How do you expect our feed corn and livestock industries to be competitive if that is what we're facing? We need to bring the tariffs down for feed corn. Thank you.
Can I have a follow-up question? Just one more.
Yes,
Sure.
Dr. Adriano.
Sir Bruce, what's your stance with the certificate of necessity to import for the fish sector?
Well, the certificate of necessity is another non-tariff barrier that makes it very difficult for business to be able to respond to the needs of the consumers. When consumers feel increases in the price of fish, what happens is that they complain. But of course, this has to go through a process that will produce the certificate of necessity for the Secretary of Agriculture to sign. It then becomes a bureaucratic and consultative nightmare. That nightmare is faced by the Agriculture Secretary. And of course, all the lobbying takes place, and he is the subject of all that lobbying because his signature is on the certificate of necessity. Why don't we let the market decide? When consumers need more fish, they're willing to pay higher prices. When higher prices are available, then businesses will respond by finding the fish supplies that are necessary to meet consumer requirements. Businessmen will never over-import because when they over-import, they lose money. They will only import up to the point where they can make money. So there is a natural correcting mechanism for imports because those importers will only import up to the point when they can make money. Beyond that, they won't. The certificate of necessity is an unnecessary, non-tariff barrier standing in the way of meeting our consumers' needs.
Thank you very much, sir.
So thank you, Dr. Adriano, for that question, and Dr. Tolentino for the answer. At this point, before we proceed with the rest of the Q&A and open forum, let me just acknowledge the presence of a special guest in our Zoom room. So we have with us Father Roberto C. Yap of the Society of Jesus, President of the Ateneo de Manila University and faculty member of the Ateneo Economics Department. We also have with us Dr. Cielito Habito, former NEDA Secretary and Professor of Economics at the Ateneo de Manila University. We also have with us Dr. Ellen Palanca, Emeritus Professor of the Ateneo de Manila University, Dr. Fernando Aldaba, former Dean of the School of Social Sciences, Ateneo de Manila University, Dr. Louis Dumlao, Dean of the 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐬 School of Management of the Ateneo de Manila University, Dr. Roberto Mariano, former Dean of the School of Economics, Singapore Management University and Professor of Economics at University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Amado Tetanco, former Governor, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Dr. Jess Dumagan, Affiliate Professor, School of Economics, De La Salle University. Dr. Jose Camacho Jr., Chancellor, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, Dean of the College of Economics and Management of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. So for the next question, we'd like to ask Dr. Tolentino in terms of your outlook with respect to food prices for both 2022 and 2023.
Well, it depends on reforms that are currently being discussed as we speak. The first discussion is taking place around meat and pork in particular, on whether or not the reduction in the tariffs as well as the increase in the minimum access volume will be made permanent. Right now, it has been reduced to a more manageable level from 30% to about 15%. 15% is still quite high if you compare it to other countries. And we're talking about a food item here. And 15%, I would say, is still enough buffer to protect local producers. The other discussion that's now happening is happening in Congress, where under the leadership of Senator Cynthia Villar, a new bill to revitalize the livestock sector as well as the feed sector is being discussed. And I'm hoping that that new bill, which will institute major reforms in the livestock industry, will be completed before this Congress lapses. Moreover, there's the hog repopulation program that the Department of Agriculture is now implementing. I hope that that takes hold and continues into the future. These are the major supply side issues that now face us with regard to meat and fish prices going into the future. I'm fairly confident that rice prices will continue to be managed well and in fact zero inflation friendly, assuming that the reforms in the NFA monopoly as well as in the management of imports are not again put under monopoly influences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tolentino, for the response. Now we go to the Zoom chat questions. We have a comment and a question from Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿. The comment is, high food prices have been a primary reason for high incidence of hunger and malnutrition in the Philippines, especially child stunting, and which of course has long-term implications. So the question is basically, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿 is asking for your comment on that particular observation.
Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, thank you for raising that. That's a major issue. Hunger is a major issue in our country. The social weather stations surveys indicate that hunger continues to plague our people, especially the children. And as you say, there are long-term cognitive impacts on children and their learning abilities. And this may explain, at least partly, our poor standing in the international comparative analysis for the quality of our schooling and education. We know that in order to improve our children's capacity in life, we need to feed them well. But we cannot feed them well if food is expensive, particularly protein-rich foods like meat and fish and vegetables. Man does not live by rice alone. I shouldn't say that. But we need rice as well as meat and fish in order to have a balanced diet, nutritious and supportive of healthy growth in mind as well as in body.
So thank you, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, for the comment and question, and as well thank you, Dr. Tolentino, for the response and answer to that. We proceed to the next question. This question is from Ms. Maureen Simeon of the Philippine Star. And the question is, Dr. Tolentino, can you elaborate on what you mentioned regarding plans to make the tariff reduction and MAV increase on pork imports a permanent policy? Will the plan to extend such a policy no longer materialize? When can we expect this to happen?
Well, the temporary decrease in tariffs for pork, as well as the temporary increase in the minimum access volume, was executed via an executive order. And the executive order issued by the president went through a couple of rounds of negotiations between the executive branch and the legislative branch, and they arrived at an agreed level. Now, in order to extend that or make it permanent, it requires another executive order or it requires legislation. I'm hoping that such legislation will be enacted, particularly for livestock, through the new livestock bill that's now being considered, and other changes that are required can necessarily be through another executive order if it's not covered under the livestock bill. So at this moment, these are key policy issues where policymakers, particularly the legislature, needs to act on before it's too late. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir, for that. We'd also like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Arsenio Balisacan, Chair of the Philippine Competition Commission. Now proceeding to the next question in our Zoom chat. This is a question from Mr. John Mark M. Boltorio. So the question is, are there economic policies that the government has been actively pursuing in relation to food inflation, and how did the pandemic exacerbate the situation on food inflation?
Food inflation has been exacerbated primarily through the lockdowns and the difficulties in the supply chain that we have faced over the last 2 years. Also, in certain areas, delivery of foodstuffs has been made more difficult, particularly when there are lockdowns that take place. And deliveries of imports has also been made difficult when the supply chain has broken down. For example, I said earlier that we need to bring down the tariffs for livestock feed, particularly corn, into our country. Now, it might be said that, wait a minute, when we import corn from ASEAN, it's already at 5%. But note that ASEAN does not produce enough corn to be able to supply our requirements. If we need significant amounts of corn, we have to go to the US. The US has been subject to major supply chain difficulties in the last year or two. And if those supply chain difficulties are not resolved, then we will face a major price increase and major bottlenecks in the supply of the feed that we need, which cannot be supplied from either Vietnam or Thailand.
So thank you, sir. Our next question is from Mr. Jason Tutor. So he says, good day, Dr. Tolentino. What would be your recommendations to inflation raised by middlemen hoarding?
Middlemen hoarding. Well, let me go back to the example of the rice tariffication law. Prior to the dissolution of the NFA monopoly, the major game in town was when will NFA import and when will NFA release the stocks? So many traders and many warehouse owners gamed that system. They would watch the NFA, and whatever the NFA did, they would exacerbate it or reduce its impact in order to gain competitive advantage. And of course, they also tried to influence how the NFA acts. NFA is a bureaucracy. It is affected by politics. It's affected by lobbying. It is not the market. When NFA had to act, they had to consult. They had to get permission from very high levels. And as a result, it became prone to political influence as well as lobbying. With the cessation of the NFA monopoly, businessmen, warehouse owners can no longer game the NFA. They are now subject to market forces, competitiveness, and compete with consumer preferences as well as supply from overseas. That is crucial that we need to also implement for the other food commodities, which are now subject to so many rules and so many bureaucratic inefficiencies that we need to reduce or eliminate so that the market can take care of the food supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tolentino. Our next question is from Mr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿. Does the new livestock development bill contain tariff reductions in corn?
Yes, it does. And that is being discussed right now in the Senate. And the significant reductions in the tariffs, yes.
So thank you, sir. Next question is from Mr. Jose Miguel. So good day, Dr. Tolentino. May I ask if there is a policy or program so that our farmers will be motivated? Because since he was a child, the farmer's thinking is that farming is not sustainable. His father always told him to study hard so that he wouldn't end up like him as a farmer. And now, being 40 years old and going on vacation, he still feels the agony of the farmers in their place, the same way he felt when he was a child.
Farming is not easy. Farming is backbreaking work. And it is no surprise that not too many people want to go into farming. So we need to support those people who want to stay in farming with the best technology available, with the most friendly policies that enable them to increase their productivity and to ensure that farming earns an income that is commensurate to the ability and the dignity of the job. It's not surprising that young people don't want to go into farming because they see the difficulties that farming has. The best farmers, however, are those that are able to earn a competitive wage. And in fact, we are seeing this now for those who are producing for the delivery market. Around Metro Manila, there have emerged a large set of young farmers planting vegetables, high-value crops, fruits, or repackaging various types of food commodities so that they can send it to households by delivery. This is a high-value proposition and a high-value market. The people who order food for delivery are able to pay better prices. And those better prices enable the farmers at the other end of the chain an income that enables them to leave their city jobs and go to the countryside and do farming as a full-time job. So we need to make farming as a revenue the same as it would be in a city office job. That, however, requires higher technology and investments in machinery, investments in training, investments in better germplasm. And that can be facilitated by productivity enhancing interventions and competitiveness enhancing interventions, not bans, not subsidies, which are not sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from former BSP Governor Armando Tetanco Jr. And the question is, given the supply side issues affecting inflation, what do you think is the appropriate role of monetary policy in keeping inflation low and stable?
Governor Tetanco, I hesitate to answer you because you're the expert here. Let me try. The BSP over the last few years, especially during the pandemic, has been focusing on ensuring that liquidity is adequate for the banking system and has also done the extraordinary by lending to the government the money required to ensure that the government keeps running and is able to provide the services required during the pandemic. So on the monetary policy side, we need to hold firm. We need to ensure that liquidity continues and the banking system is safe. On the supply side, however, we cannot wash our hands of the situation. In the past, we would say, well, supply side yan, hindi natin problema. But actually, it is our problem because, and it is the opportunity for BSP to help. BSP, fortunately or unfortunately, has superior analytical capabilities and access to data that is not available to many other government agencies. We need to use that data. We need to use that analytical capacity to contribute to the discussion on supply side issues. And that's what I'm doing today. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
So thank you again, Dr. Tolentino. Now for our next question, we have it from Miss Maria Renette Victoria Novisteros. It's a question and an observation from her end. The observation is that rice and fish inflation seem to be high, but she's trying to also connect that with her observation that the farmers and the fishermen seem to be suffering. So she wants a clarification on those particular observed realities. Rice and fish inflation on one hand, and perception that farmers and fishermen are suffering in spite of that.
Yes, rice is rice inflation is not high. In fact, it's negative or low. It is true that rice farmers need additional support. That is why the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund exists as part of the rice tariffication law. Under the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, farmers are given free improved seeds. They are given free machinery. They are supported with training and technology. These are inputs and these are interventions that support the welfare and competitiveness of the farmers, so that the reforms that were instituted in the rice tariffication law are reforms that also support the welfare of the farmers. Now, we need to institute reforms also in fish. Fishermen are among the poorest in our country. They have weak access to improved equipment, supplies, fishing boats that will enable them to increase their catch, that will enable them to compete with other fishermen from other countries who are doing incursions into our waters. So we need to institute RCEP-like reforms and support for fisheries that we instituted for rice. And in fact, this is the same story that we can say for the other food commodities. RCEP-like reforms and support also are required for meat and for livestock and for corn, so that not only will their productivity increase, there's also support for their welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we go to a question placed in the comment section in Facebook. The question is, given that we have tried to modernize agriculture in the past 20 years, and yet agriculture productivity and output growth have not responded well in the same period, what do you think are the political imperatives so the reforms can succeed in the future?
In the past, we tried to increase the budgets for agriculture, but not enough. We tried to institute reforms in agriculture, but most of the reforms were about subsidies and bans, not interventions that will increase competitiveness and productivity. The reforms and interventions that we need are for competitiveness and productivity, not subsidies, not bans. The focus in the past was on supporting the NFA. It has been proven through long, painful, expensive experience that the NFA did not work. And reviving the NFA will also not work. We need to ensure that any support that's coming from the government for farmers must be focused on productivity and competitiveness. That is what will bring benefits not only to farmers, but also to consumers who have to pay for all of this at the end anyway.
Thank you, sir. We'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Dr. Benjamin Diokno. Now, for our next question, with respect to the future of agriculture, this is a question from Mr. Engelbert de la Cruz. So good afternoon, Dr. Tolentino. So given everything that is happening around us, how can we effectively prevent our farmers and fishermen from shifting away from agriculture due to low income?
It is a matter of historical fact from the experience of all economies that as agriculture becomes more productive and is able to feed more people, then you will see farmers moving away from agriculture. A productive agriculture is an agriculture that is able to support more people even with fewer farmers. You have mechanized agriculture means fewer farmers. You have high technology agriculture means fewer farmers. So to improve productivity in the farming sector, we need to create jobs off-farm and non-farm so that the children of farmers can productively engage in occupations other than farming, and the remaining farmers are more productive and able to feed everybody. And that is the history of economics, of agriculture in most developed countries. We need to ensure that we are able to provide the technology support and the assistance that is necessary for farmers to gain the productivity they need, so that the children of farmers are able to move away to non-farm and off-farm jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tolentino. Another question in Facebook. This is from Ian Uy, speaking about inflation. As a country who imports more raw materials for feeds, what is BSP's plan to counter the weakening of our peso against the US dollar?
Well, it hasn't really happened yet. Depends on what the US does. As they shift and as they transition out of pandemic footing. And this is being considered as we speak, and the central bank, the Banco Central, is studying the data and keeping track of all of the factors, so that when it happens, we are able to act appropriately to defend the peso, or at least ensure that the exchange rates are stable and we continue to support international trade as we need to do. Each and every day, the data is coming in, and each and every day we keep track of the major elements so that we are able to react quickly, and we are able to react in as appropriate a manner as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tolentino. Now, for our last question in this Q&A segment, in our open forum segment, again, it's a question in the Zoom chat. This is from KD Tan. Should we push for amendments to the Agri-Agra law to help the agricultural sector?
Yes, we should. Governor Ben Diokno has in fact just written to the Senate as well as the Office of the President to ask that the Agri-Agra amendment be done now. We have been talking about the Agri-Agra amendment for so long that delaying it further will only cause more difficulties for the agriculture sector as well as for the banks that serve the agriculture sector. We have learned since the Agri-Agra law was enacted in the 1970s that lending quotas do not work. What works is to ensure that the banking system is able to serve those projects that are profitable, that are competitive, and that are able to generate the revenues required to serve their loan covenants. Now, also we need to amend the Agri-Agra law so that it serves not only agrarian reform beneficiaries and agriculture projects, but serves the entire agricultural value chain. We know that the agricultural value chain is not only production, to which the old law was limited, but it's also about processing, it's also about warehousing, it's also about transport and distribution. And all these segments of the chain need to be served with loans so that the entire set of actors in the agriculture can access finance and can operate to the best of their ability. That is one of the major reforms that is contained in the Agri-Agra amendment that the BSP is calling for. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Tolentino, first for sharing with us your special lecture webinar about food prices and inflation, and at the same time for answering all of those many questions in our Q&A segment. So thank you very much, Dr. Tolentino. Now, at this point, we would like to invite everybody to our future economic seminars. So on February 9, we will have competition policy for economic development. On February 23, policy reform options for Indonesia in the post-COVID era with some implications for the Philippines. On March 9, international cooperation for development, learning from trade and tax policies. March 23, integrating applied fieldwork into the undergraduate economics curriculum. April 27, conducting randomized controlled trials in developing countries, lessons and practices. May 11, strength in numbers, a field experiment in gender, influence and group dynamics. May 25, the site-specific nutrient management strategy for rice, a microeconomic analysis. So we invite everybody to also visit our website for materials from previous economics seminars. And we also invite you to visit us in the various social media platforms where we are available. And for this part of the event, we now proceed to the second segment, and this is the signing ceremony for the Memorandum of Understanding on Research Collaboration. And I now turn over the virtual floor to Mr. Joey Nabrida of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So good afternoon, everyone. While we're waiting for our colleagues from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, for those requesting for certificates of the event this afternoon, we've placed the email addresses that you can liaise with for the request. We have research.economics@ateneo.edu and economics.sauce@ateneo.edu. Thank you.
Sorry for the. Okay, good afternoon. Sorry for the delay. We just encountered some technical difficulties. But again, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome this afternoon's signing ceremony on the Memorandum of Understanding on Research Collaboration between the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and the Ateneo de Manila University. We are honored to have with us today our distinguished BSP officials, the Honorable Governor Benjamin E. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐞𝐬, and Monetary Board Member V. Bruce Tolentino. Our two partners from the academe who are with us virtually this afternoon, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿 Jr., Chancellor of UP Los Baños, and Father Roberto C. Yap, Society of Jesus, President of the Ateneo de Manila University. Let me also acknowledge the former governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Armando Tetanco Jr., who's with us virtually, and Attorney Elmer Capule, Senior Assistant Governor and General Counsel, who's with us here in the BSP Security Plan Complex. We would like to welcome also the officials from UP Los Baños and Ateneo de Manila University and members of the Research Experts Panel who are on virtual mode, and the BSP officers and members of the BSP Research Academy who are present here today. A pleasant day to you all. This ceremony is on live stream through the Facebook page of BSP and the Ateneo de Manila University. To open up the program and deliver the welcome remarks, may I call on the officer in charge of the BSP Research Academy, Dr. Joselito Basilio.
Thank you, Joey. Governor Benjamin E. 𝐏𝐽𝐜𝐞𝐬, Monetary Board Member Bruce Tolentino, General Counsel 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐜, former Governor Armando M. Tetanco Jr., Reverend Father Roberto C. Yap, Chancellor Jose V. Camacho Jr., members of the BSP Research Experts Panel, and colleagues from UPLB and the Ateneo. On behalf of the BSP and its Research Academy, welcome to the signing event of the BSP's Memoranda of Understanding with UPLB and the Ateneo. In a book entitled Central Banking as State Building, Policymakers and Their Nationalism in the Philippines, published by Ateneo de Manila University Press in 2016, the author talks about how, in fact, central bankers in the Philippines from 1949 to 1960 worked hard to pursue structural reform based on particular policy ideals that clashed, but were products of policy debates and macroeconomic research during the period. The end result was a central bank that moved away from domestic politico-economic structures, but one that evolved to be at par internationally. Forward to 2022, the BSP continues to uphold its commitment to responsible and responsive policymaking through careful, rigorous, and independent research based on sound theoretical frameworks and solid empirical backing. Today's event put this commitment into even sharper focus. Even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, economic and research environment has already been changing fundamentally and has become increasingly complex. Central banks, therefore, need a deep, thorough, and comprehensive understanding of the world wherein they operate. By broadening their perspectives, central banks can better understand the workings of the economy. Collaboration in diverse multidisciplinary issues is aimed precisely at that. Better understanding of the issues and deeper appreciation of policy outcomes can be had if these issues are seen beyond the lens of central bankers. By promoting cross-engagements in policy and applied research, the BSP can continue to remain relevant as a thought leader in policy and in research. This challenge becomes more imperative as economists grapple with the new operating environment. There has been a rethinking of policies, programs, and priorities, and this entails extensive research work. Such is a daunting task if undertaken by only one institution. But working collectively with other knowledge-based centers, we can leverage on our expertise, skill sets, policy tools, and resources to obtain new insights, distill lessons, and craft sensible policies. We hope that the three institutions represented today, all of them quote-unquote research frontliners in their own right, if I may borrow Chancellor Camacho's term, will all stand to benefit from the diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, including the collegial interplay of ideas and thoughtful critiques of the issues at hand. Research collaboration with UPLB and the Ateneo, along with BSP's existing partnerships with PIDS, UPSE, ACPC, and the Philippine American Educational Foundation, is envisioned to promote close engagements starting from the identification of research ideas through the tedious but rewarding task of conducting the actual research and empirical validation, up to the dissemination of the research output, and ultimately to the crafting of sensible and responsive policies and structural reform agenda. I am sure that we are all looking forward to these partnerships getting considerable traction. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Basilio. And now for some messages from our partners. First, may I call on Father Roberto C. Yap of the Society of Jesus, President of Ateneo de Manila University, for his message.
BSP Governor Benjamin Diokno, UPLB Chancellor Jose Camacho Jr., Governor Armando Tetanco Jr., Dr. Bruce Tolentino, faculty, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be with you all today, although virtually, to mark the beginning of hopefully a long-term collaboration between the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Ateneo de Manila University to its Department of Economics and the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development and UP Los Baños. We are honored to have the opportunity to establish a joint research undertaking with the BSP. The BSP's long-standing reputation in providing policy directions in the areas of finance, banking, and credit is laudable. Its involvement in various projects and initiatives that help to maintain price stability and promote financial stability contributes to achieving a balanced and sustainable economic growth for our country. Credit is due to Governor 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜 for continuing this solid reputation of the BSP. Congratulations, Governor 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜, for being named the Global Central Banker of the year 2022. Notwithstanding its solid performance, the BSP initiated efforts to improve its research capability, cognizant of the fact that research provides the basis for well-grounded policy formulation and analysis. In these research initiatives, the BSP affirms the importance of collaboration and intellectual exchange, including the sharing of data and resources, co-authorship, and publications. We in the Ateneo de Manila University share this conviction about the important contribution of research to society. Ateneo, through the Department of Economics and the Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development, is dedicated to producing evidence-based research that can serve as input to policy making. The Memorandum of Understanding that we will sign enables Ateneo economists to conduct research independently, collaboratively, or jointly with BSP researchers. I strongly believe that our combined strengths and expertise will not only produce relevant and useful research, but also strengthen and cultivate our respective human research capacities. As stated in the MOU, at least 4 of our economics department faculty will be designated as visiting research economists at the Bangko Sentral. Together with the Bangko Sentral economists, as well as a graduate student from our university, operative and applicable research can be developed in the areas of monetary policy, financial sector governance, banking systems, competition, and financial inclusion. Through the publications and conferences that we expect to result from the research, we hope to educate and influence even more academics, researchers, and practitioners in the fields of finance and economics, thus leading to a more robust economic system for our country and better lives for our fellow Filipinos. We thank the BSP for this additional chance to put our academic expertise in the service of our nation, and we look forward to continuing our collaborative relationship for many years in the future. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for your message, Father Yap. And now may I call on the Chancellor of UP Los Baños, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿 Jr. Dr. Camacho, I think your mic is on mute. Can you please turn on your mic, please? You're still on mute, sir. Dr. Camacho, yeah, your mic is still on mute.
Yeah. Sorry for that technical problem. I hope I can be heard now. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We can
Yeah.
hear you now.
Let me first greet our Governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Dr. Benjamin 𝐏𝐿𝐴, member of the Monetary Board, Bruce Tolentino, to the Senior Assistant Governor and General Counsel of BSP, Attorney 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐤𝐬, to the officer in charge of the BSP Research Academy, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐤𝐬, the president of the Ateneo de Manila University, Father Roberto Yap, the Philippine Competition Commission Chair, Dr. Arsenio Balisacan, and to Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐤𝐬, former NEDA Director General, and to the members of the Ateneo de Manila University and UPLB faculty, and to the officers of the administration of the UPLB. Again, good afternoon. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Let me say that it is indeed our honor to be here with you today, the signing of the MOU between BSP and UPLB. And today's occasion is a significant milestone between BSP and UPLB's partnership. We commit to this work, and we will be achieving our goal more closely, the pursuit of timely and relevant research that can help advance meaningful and beneficial monetary and economic policies for our fellow Filipinos. As we envision a future-proof UPLB in terms of our mandates in instruction, in research and public service, UPLB is indeed committed and proactive in sustaining collaborations that will catalyze and to enhance the development of our communities. In fact, we have launched the new research agenda of UPLB, which we call the UPLB Agora. Agora, which stands for Accelerating Growth Through One Research and Extension in Action. This Agora, we will be promoting this to other institutions. So we'll have a series of activities. And this upcoming research collaboration between UPLB and BSP will certainly contribute in one of the 4 pillars of the UPLB Agora, which is on resilience, which among others would seek to advance a sustainable socio-economic development among our communities. We are excited to carry out and to explore many important activities and programs with the BSP, such as the projects on policy communication and financial literacy, among other many projects that will really bring to the fore the expertise and mandate of both of our institutions. And thus, I thank everyone whose efforts and dedication have made this partnership possible. Rest assured that we are committed to do our part in successfully implementing our joint endeavors, and we look forward to working with BSP in many years to come. Thank you very much, and may we always be in our best health. Mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you for your message, Dr. Camacho. At this point, we can now start with the signing ceremony. May I request Governor Diokno, Dr. Camacho, and Father Yap to sign the documents. And may we also request the witnesses to sign the documents as well. After signing the documents, there will be a group photo. Okay, so for the first screenshot, may we request the governor and the Ateneo de Manila University signatories to hold the signed documents upright. Thank you. For the second screenshot, may we request the governor with the UP Los Baños signatories to hold the signed documents upright. Thank you. For the next screenshot, may we ask the governor with the Ateneo de Manila University officials and attendees. So for those who are in front of their PCs or their laptops, can you please turn on your cameras so we can have a screenshot with the governor? Okay. For the last screenshot, may we ask the governor and the UP Los Baños officials and attendees to hold their signed documents and have a screenshot with the governor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And now to give his message, it is both an honor and a privilege to call on the Chairman of the Monetary Board and Governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, the Honorable Dr. Benjamin E. Diokno.
Father Roberto 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, President of the Ateneo de Manila University, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿 Jr., Chancellor of UP Los Baños, Dr. Maria Luz Vilches, Ateneo Vice President for Loyola Schools, Dr. Zarina Saloma Akpedonu, Dean, Ateneo School of Social Sciences, Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, Dean, UPLB College of Economics and Management, officials and colleagues from Ateneo, UPLB, and BSP, good afternoon. Central banks have long benefited from academic and scholarly contributions in the field of macroeconomics, monetary economics, banking, finance, and other areas relevant to central banking functions and tasks. Academics and researchers have provided valuable theoretical insights and empirical evidence to inform the conduct of monetary policy, the crafting of bank regulations, and the enhancement of the country's payment system. Nonetheless, central banks recognize the importance of undertaking their own economic research. As 𝐏𝐺 Trichet, former president of the European Central Bank, points out, Central bank research has an important task of bridging a possible gap between academics and policymakers, and of creating meaningful venues for interactions with the academic community. As such, the BSP has always valued the interactions between the academe and other research institutions. For instance, the BSP Sterling Chairs, which have been established since 2006. These were upgraded in 2008 to the BSP UP Centennial Professorial Chairs, with the aim of continuously supporting the research, teaching, training, and other programs of the University of the Philippines system. These were envisioned to help maintain and promote a critical mass of productive research scholars in economics, statistics, business administration, finance, accounting, agriculture, and other related fields of the UP system as part of the collaboration between the BSP and the university. The BSP also conducts regular environmental scanning exercises, or 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿. These forums serve to foster open discussions between the BSP and other institutions on various critical and current issues. To further strengthen the research capacity of the BSP, we established the BSP Research Academy to help foster the research culture in the BSP by promoting and conducting objective, rigorous, independent, and policy-relevant research. We hope to achieve the level of objectivity and rigor of academics to produce evidence-based research that can inform policy formulation and decisions. We also intend to explore emerging issues and engage in blue skies research that can help the BSP become future-ready. This is where collaboration is important. Through this Memorandum of Understanding on Research Collaboration with the UP Los Baños and with the Ateneo de Manila University, the BSP affirms the importance of collaboration and intellectual exchange in strengthening research. Among the ways to achieve this and promote collaborative research efforts between the BSP, UPLB, and Ateneo research communities would be through the sharing of data and resources, co-authorships, joint publications, sponsorships of conferences and other research events where ongoing studies can be vetted critically in informal or innovative settings. Thus, we reinforce our joint commitment to increase the capacity of our institutions in conducting objective, rigorous, and policy-relevant research. Finally, I'd like to thank our research partners, UPLB and Ateneo de Manila University, for agreeing to participate in this valuable and noteworthy endeavor. May this mark the beginning of a long, productive, and collegial relationships towards building a body of high-quality research for our institutions and for the nation. Maraming salamat at mabuhay.
Thank you, Governor 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, for that inspiring message and for gracing this significant event with your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, this ends our program, and we would like to thank again our special guests and partners from UP Los Baños and the Ateneo de Manila University. We'd also like to thank Monetary Board Member V. Bruce Tolentino, Attorney 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, and Dr. 𝐏𝐫𝐢𝐜𝐿, and also former Governor Armando Tetango Jr. for gracing this event. Please stay well, everyone, and God bless us all.